I speak to a lot of politicians here on the State of the Nation, and I've started to realize that politicians eventually get into their own little world, their own little village, where they are worried about politics, not about the people. They in fact stop listening to the people. And it used to be okay. You could do that in the past when a lot of these political systems were created. The idea around politics was that you would have people who were representatives of the people, that lived amongst us, that became politicians and then acted in the best interests of the communities they came from. But then politics became a profession, and politicians became isolated from the people. They went to parliament, they flew in jets, they go and they no longer live in suburbs, they no longer live in their constituencies. They just live amongst each other, and their lives have moved so far away from the people they represent that all they start worrying about is power, not politics. Now, if you go back to the earlier days of democracy, it would work because the local village would vote out that politician that didn't serve their interest because he still lived amongst them. The past era has been the problem. When politicians started living in parliamentary villages and they started to need blue lights, couldn't catch the bus because that was beneath them because they're politicians. But oddly enough, I'm quite optimistic because there's something that's been the dramatic equalizer, and that has been social media. Yeah, when you're as old as me, you can remember those days where, if you didn't like something, what could you really do? Write a letter to the newspaper and hope that they would publish it and nobody would read it? It was about the most civic action you could bring. Otherwise, you would have to become a politician yourself. And not everybody wants to be a politician, even if you've got a valid case to raise. So why I'm optimistic is that there has been a game changer, and the game changer has been social media. It is the town hall. As flawed as it may be, we may have a problem with some of the people that run social media, but the point is it gives you a place for us to put out our ideas, much like we do on the State of the Nation, which is on the road to 100,000 subscribers. So you better subscribe to this because we're going to get there by July. That's our target. But social media has become the platform, it has become the town square where every good idea and bad idea can be ventilated. And I don't think that the bad ideas last as long as the good ideas. But I want to tell you where I think that social media has not just started to change the world, it's changed the world and it's inexorable. And I want to point out two examples. And we've used these examples before, so I won't go into them in great detail. Obviously, the example number one is Argentina. Argentina, for those that don't know what the Argentinian problem was quite simply, after the Second World War, Argentina did have a problem with, it's a very prosperous country, rich in minerals, unbelievably fertile, all good things. There was even a saying back in the early 1900s, when you called somebody rich, they were as rich as an Argentine. So that's how rich Argentina used to be. And what happens when you attract money, when you do have money, is that you also attract labor and an underclass, the people that work in the fields, people that work in the factories. And soon enough, those poor people start outnumbering the rich people. And that's what happened to Argentina after the Second World War. And in a country searching for answers, as they like to do in South America, they turned to the military, where there was a dashing young officer called Juan Perón, who was the strong guy soldier who happened to have a celebrity wife, Evita. And they were the celebrity couple of the day, and he really was there because he was going to help poor people. But, that idea always sounds great. But what ended up happening? A system called Peronism, which is sort of like what South Africa has lived with for the last 30 years. You've got a strong party that everybody votes for. They vote them in every time. The party destroys the economy with some bad policies, right? We know all about that. So the country no longer gets that kind of tax revenue that they should get. The government then wants to help the poor people. The only way to do that is in two ways. One is overemploy in government. So you end up with a dramatically bloated government. That happened in Argentina. And then you borrow money because you've got that shortfall. And boy, did Argentina borrow money. And soon enough, the Argentinian economy was in such a mess that they couldn't service the money that the debt that they had incurred. But like we're getting close to in South Africa. But none of the politicians would change the policies. None of them would cut the size of government. And this reared its head. And for the last couple of years, it's been anomalous, the Argentinian situation. And along came Javier Milei. It's a very flamboyant guy with wild hair and his ideas. And his big idea was he was going to tackle these issues, which so many people were convinced were entrenched in Argentina. They believed big government was entrenched. They believed handouts from the state, social grants was entrenched. That nobody would have the courage to campaign that they're going to cut these things. And none of the voters would vote for them because he only promised his voters pain. He said, we're going to cut the size of government. We are going to cut the number of ministries, which is a bit like South Africa. They also eventually had a ministry of everything. We're going to cut the social grants. And everybody said, there's no ways voters would vote for him. So he wins the election. Because the mainstream media won't carry him, but social media was carrying his message. And Argentinians basically said, we've had enough of this. The old system doesn't work. Well, Milei came in. He's been in there now, I think, for 2 years. And he's done what he said he was going to do. He inflicted the kind of pain on the country that was so vitally necessary. He cut the size of government. He cut the number of ministerial posts. Cut the social grants. Started to pay back the loans. And initially the response was horrendous. But guess what? Argentina is starting to get through the worst. It's a bit like breaking the fever. Now, every analyst that was analyzing Argentina said those people will never go for it because why would they vote for that kind of pain? The reality is that the Argentinians knew they were on the wrong track and had been on the wrong track for more than 70 years. But now you could have this guy explain it to them and they had somebody who promised to do something about it and he did. And they'll never go back to the old ways again. That was one case. Obviously, the most celebrated case was in the USA. Americans had said that the major issues, the things that they really don't like about America in the build-up to the 2024 elections, was their porous southern border where people were coming in from South and Central America. Crime as a result of this unregulated immigration. Gangs. Right? Prices, etc. Well, you had two candidates. One that embraced social media and one that didn't. The one that didn't decided to campaign using celebrities, Kamala Harris. The other one decided to use podcasts to go and get interviewed, answer questions of people, and vowed to do something about the porous border, illegal immigration, gangs, etc. Now, we may not like the way that President Donald Trump has gone about it, but Americans do. Because here was a candidate that listened to the people, got voted in, and is doing what he promised to do, much like Javier Milei. Now, South Africa sits in a very, very interesting place. We know a lot about South Africans. We know that the South Africa that you and I live in is not the South Africa that our politicians seem to live in. For obvious reasons, they do not live in the world that we live in. The world we live in isn't wrecked with some kind of racial disharmony where people are trying to stab each other in the streets. No. We're all trying to get through the day, do the best we can, have a decent life, have the lights on, let the water run through the taps. We all have the same hopes and dreams that our children can have a better life than us. Our politicians don't seem to think like that. They seem to think that we all hate each other and we're on the verge of a race war. Every time South Africans are surveyed and asked, what are your biggest problems? Always comes down to the same issues: unemployment, safety and security, education standards. It's no mystery. We know exactly what it is that South Africans want. But what astounds me is that despite every poll, despite the last election where people said we are unhappy with the direction we're going in, the government and the political parties just will not listen. Blacks were denied land ownership in the old South Africa. They were denied by law. They weren't allowed to buy property. In the new South Africa, of course, black people want to buy property. So what does our government do? They pass a law saying we're going to expropriate land. No land is safe. When your electorate has told you that they want to own land. Like really, can't you just hear? Other parties, Democratic Alliance, etc., join the government of national unity. And it was warmly received in South Africa, saying, yeah, at least now we're going to have these different voices sitting there in the same place, and they're going to make South Africa a better place. And they spent the last year bickering. 1 year has elapsed. We've had no economic growth. Our unemployment rate has gone higher. Do any of those parties that are involved in the government of national unity think that what's happened over the last year is going to be a great vote catcher? You are part of government. You went in there. You promised the country growth. We've seen nothing. We've only seen more regulation. We've only seen more bills that take away our freedoms. And yet you promised growth. You can't expect voters to now support you when you do that. So where does this leave South Africa? I think it leaves South Africa very vulnerable to a good or a bad outcome. Because what is going to happen is the following. Somebody will come along that will listen to the people. And there'll be a force for good or a force for bad. But they will tell people what they're going to do, and they will do it. The opportunity here is for a Vladimir Putin type strongman to come in and say, I've got the answers. I've got the answers. You listen to me. I'm the great dictator. And he starts doing what he's going to do. The simple way to do would be to clamp down on crime, start shooting people, hanging people, bring back the death penalty. That would be very, very popular. South Africa is vulnerable to that. Could happen. But I don't think that's in keeping with the character of South Africans. I think what we're more vulnerable to is we are vulnerable for somebody that comes in outside of government, not tainted by government, and says, you know what, I'm going to give you your freedom. I'm going to create economic prosperity. And I'm going to hold you to account, South Africa. You better get out there and work. And I've said this before, but I think that our next majority party doesn't exist yet. Because I'm looking at these people playing politics while our lives just get worse. I look at the city of Johannesburg, where are we in 2025? We've been past the last local government election for 4 years. Johannesburg, nobody got a majority. And these politicians have done everything to hold on to power. We now live with the real doomsday coalition of the ANC, EFF, Patriotic Alliance, and Action SA here in Johannesburg. And the situation is so bad that even Cyril Ramaphosa was disappointed. And my God, it takes a lot to disappoint him. Now, you've done that power play to what end? Do you think that's going to be popular with voters? That you came in and promised to do nothing and you've done nothing? You think everyone's going to be okay with that? No politician. They're not going to be happy with that. And they're going to vent that unhappiness, and we're going to give them platforms to vent that unhappiness. So what I'm going to leave you with is this. In my opinion, before the next general election, a movement is going to be formed that is outside of the current political structures. That will be a movement that will start on social media, that will become a political party, and they will take over the country. You know who did that? Vladimir Zelensky. He was a comedian in a show. And he had got a great profile from his comedy. And he said, you know what, I couldn't do a worse job than these politicians. And the people agreed with him. And his country was doing well. In fact, it was doing so well that his big neighbor decided to invade. That was more of, if ever you're looking for a vote of confidence, that was it. But South Africa is ripe for that. It's not some other cadre being deployed or somebody coming with a voting bloc or somebody with some kind of tribal affiliation. It's somebody that listens to you and listens to me, that says that the issue that we really don't like are the potholes, is the grime, is the street lights not working, is the corruption and nobody goes to jail, is the 32 cabinet positions. And he does something about it. Or she, how about that for something even better? Because that happened in Italy, right? It's happening all over the world. South Africa is the last place and we are vulnerable. And when it happens, you better be ready to support that candidate because it'll make South Africa a better place. So, let's support Pace Car Rental. They're going to be there ready for our next president, whoever that may be. Let's support the State of the Nation because we are going to be as loud as can be. When that new candidate comes along from outside of politics, we're going to support them. Because that is what South Africa needs, is some common sense and somebody that will act on what they say they're going to act on. Thank you for joining me. That's been my opinion.